So good morning, guys. Welcome to this Capstone 3 Prep 3 Part 1 session. So this session is about Prep 3 Part 1, wherein over here we're gonna see the overview of business analysis concepts. This Capstone Project 3 is divided into two parts, okay, which is Part 1 and Part 2. So in today's session, we're gonna discuss about the Part 1. Okay. Yeah, let us continue. So guidelines to this session. So whatever the doubts you're having right now, please put it in the chat box. At the end of the session, I'll be clarifying your doubts. Okay. And the session recordings will be available in the COEPD YouTube channel. Okay. Next. So here in this prep 3 part 1, the first question is about they're asking about to draw use case diagram and they have given a scenario. Okay. So they have given that a customer can make a payment either by card or by wallet or cash and by net bank. I think you might have gone through the use case diagram in prep 1 part 2, right? So here also the first question is about use case diagram where a scenario is given to you. On this particular scenario regarding the payment, you need to draw use case diagram. So here you can observe a use case diagram. So likewise, you need to draw use case diagram in your question paper. For drawing this use case diagram, you can make use of MS Visual tool. So where there would be actors and use cases and the relationship and which type of relationship you need to mention over here. All this, everything, you need to put it in your use case diagram. Okay. Before starting use case diagram, get to know what is a use case diagram. Okay. So use case diagram is something which shows a user, how an external user is been interacting with the system, right? So get to know what is use case diagram and about this particular scenario, draw an use case diagram. Okay. This is about the question number 1. So coming to the question number 2. So here, what they have asked to mention about what is boundary class, controller class, and the entity class. So first, in your document, mention what is this about. Give the descriptions about what is a boundary class, what is a controller class, and what is an entity class. So what is a boundary class? It shows, how we handle the interactions between the system and an external actor. Such type of interactions is shown by the boundary class. Okay, so payment option boundary and the card payment boundary. Okay, next coming to the controller class is nothing but it acts as an intermediary between the boundary and the entity class. So here the payment initiator controller and the card payment boundary is two. So coming to the entity class, it represents the core data and the business logic of the application, which is the customer for the payment. Okay, so first mention what are these about and from the use case diagram scenario, mention which would come under boundary class, which would come under control class and which would come under entity class. And coming to over here, if we observe these symbols, the boundary class is represented by this symbol and the controller class is represented by the circle with an arrow pointed on it. And the entity class is represented by circle and the line beneath that. This is how the three classes representations would look like. Okay, mention about all this in your document. So the next question, the third question is about how do you place these classes on a three-tier architecture? I think you might have gone through the three-tier architecture in your prep 1, right? So what is the three-tier architecture? It consists of 3 layers, right? Business logic layer, data layer, and the application layer and all, correct? So mention about the three-tier architecture. Okay, then what are the classes you have derived previously? So these classes which comes under which layer you need to mention. Here a sample example is given. So under user layer, which is the presentation layer, which classes would come into picture and all. Under business logic layer, which would come under picture, and under data layer, which would come under picture. So presentation is nothing but the boundary class, right? Boundary is nothing, it shows the representation. Correct. So those would come under the presentation layer. And the business logic layer, the controller classes you can see over here. And the data layer, here we have this customer and the payment entity classes. So first mention three-tier architecture and whatever the classes you have derived previously, which would cover which of this layer you need to mention in this particular question. Okay. Next. Fourth question is about the explain domain model for the customer making payment through net bank. So what is a domain model? A domain model is a conceptual representation that defines the structure, relationships, and the behavior of entities within a specific problem domain. So in this question, in your document, what you need to write, first you need to explain what is a domain model is about. Explain about domain model. And then here they have given a scenario like you need to draw a domain model for the customer making payment through net banking. So I think you might have gone through this, DB design and all, right? Where the tables are there and the tables have entities and attributes and how these tables are connected. So here also in domain model, the same way you need to put your diagram for this customer making payment through net banking. So first analyze what tables would come under for this purpose, like customer, bank, payment account. So how these tables are connected, you need to represent it. You need to mention about domain model and with a diagram, likewise, in this particular question. Okay, next. The next question is about the sequence diagram. So as a BA, so we need to mainly focus on use case, activity, and irreadable knowledge of sequence diagram is necessary, guys. So what is a sequence diagram? It shows an interaction, okay, mainly used in the system designs and all, and how the interactions has been flowing from one object to another or from one actor to another. The interaction of messages in a sequential order is shown in this sequence diagram. So a sequence diagram is a type of interaction diagram used in software engineering and system designs to illustrate how processes operate with one another and in what order. Here, if you can see, so whatever the scenario which was given before, customer making payment through net banking, for that you need to draw a sequence diagram, guys. Okay, so here you can see, here we have customer and we have net banking system and the bank. So how these are interacting with each other, how the sequence of messages are passing between these objects and all is shown through this sequence diagram. So first customer is initiating some payment. Okay, then the net banking system will authenticate the customer details with the bank. Then it would validate the payment details and the deduction of amount would happen. And the process payment, then the payment confirmation. Then it receives the bank would make the customer to receiving this payment confirmation. So for that scenario, you draw a sequence diagram on your book. Okay. So next question is about conceptual model. A conceptual model is nothing but a high level representation of a system. Okay. And that helps in understanding the visualizing and communicating the essential aspects of a domain. So here we won't mainly focus on the high level representation only. It doesn't focus on how the attributes are being interacting with each other or entities, how this related to each other. But how are the concepts which are related to each other that is mainly shown in this conceptual model. It provides a clear and simplified view of the domain and make it easier to understand. So in domain model, there we have observed that there is a customer, there are attributes and entities, and how these attributes or entities are related, it is shown. In conceptual model, it doesn't focus mainly on how the entities are related, and it mainly focus on how the concepts are related mainly. Okay, so entities, as we can see, customer, product, and order, and making a payment. And attributes which would come under is customer ID, name, email, and phone number. So it mainly focus on relationships like customer placing an order. Okay. Next. The next question is about the MVC architecture. So what do you mean by this MVC? The model, view, and the controller. It is a framework, is an architectural pattern that separates an application into main logical components, the model, view, controller. I think you have an idea regarding the three-tier architecture, right? We have divided into user layer, business logic layer, and the data layer. In a similar way, we are dividing the application into three logical components, which is the model, view, and the controller. What is view? It is nothing but the presentation layer of the application. Whatever we are viewing, that is nothing but your presentation layer. Okay. Next, model in the sense it represents the data and the business logic of the application. And the controller in the sense it acts as a bridge between the model and the view. Okay. So first you need to mention what is this MVC architecture is about. And there are the guidelines which are there about the MVC architecture. Okay, guys, you need to mention about those rules, architecture rules. I think these rules are there in your workbook. Once go through these rules and all. Okay. Then how would you place these whatever you have identified, the classes and all, how do you place this in the MVC architecture? You need to mention it. So there is a scenario, right, in use case diagram regarding that. How would you place those classes in a three-tier architecture and all? We can mention it over here. Okay. Then next, the next question is about the BA contribution in projects in waterfall model. Okay. So in this question, you need to write about how a BA contributes in a project in a waterfall model in all stages. I think you are aware that the waterfall model consists of different stages. If one stage is completed, then only we move to next stage, right? So you need to mention about every stage which are there in the waterfall model and the activities there's a BA does in all this model and these artifacts and the resources. You need to mention in all the stages what is the contribution of the BA. Okay. Next. The next question is about the conflict management and the Thomas Kilmann technique. So what is conflict management? Conflict, as the name indicates, there is some issue or some disagreement. The conflict management in this sense, the process of solving or resolving the conflicts or disagreements. We know, right? In any project, it's not like everything goes in a smooth flow. There might be some disagreements or there may be some conflicts which would happen between the individuals or between the groups and all. So, in order to resolve the conflict, we are using some technique which is called as Thomas Kilmann technique. Okay, this Kilmann technique is widely used for assessing conflict resolution styles and guiding individuals in selecting appropriate strategy to managing conflicts. So there are 5 steps in this conflict management. First, we need to identify the conflict. Then we discuss about the details. Then we need to agree with the root problem. And we need to check for every possible solution for the conflict. It's not like we need to move on with the conflict. No, we need to resolve that, right? So the negotiate solution to avoid future conflicts and okay. So in this question, you need to first read what is a conflict management about and how do we use this Thomas Kilmann technique in order to solve these conflicts. And there are 5 strategies in this Thomas Kilmann, like, according, accommodating, avoiding, competing, collaborating, and all. So mention about those 5 steps in this particular questions also. Okay. So the next question is about what are the reasons for a project failure? So here we have given few points regarding what could be the possible reasons for project failure. So it could be poor planning of the project and all. And if the objectives are not clear and the requirements are not clear also can lead to the project failure. And there is a no proper risk management. And if there is a poor communication between any of the team members in a project or between the stakeholders or between a business analyst and all, that could be a reason for the project failure. If there is a scope creep in the sense, if the project we are not been able to complete within the time and budget is nothing but scope creep, right? That could be one of the reason for project failure. And if the stakeholders are not being engaged frequently as per the requirement and all, okay? And if there are no proper resources, and if there are any technical challenges and all. So these could be some of the possible reasons for the project failure. Okay, here we have just given in the bullet points. But whatever the answer you are writing in your documents, though, please put it in an elaborative way. Not just this question, every question you try to put it some in an elaborative way. Okay, here we have just mentioned few reasons. If you have any other reasons also which is there for project failure, mention about this reason and put it in an elaborative way. You describe about that. Okay. Next, the next question is about the challenges faced in a projects for BA. So there might be situations where the BA might face a lot of challenges while they're working in a project, right? So here we have mentioned about the few possible challenges over here. The first one could be like, unclear requirements or frequent change of requirements. That could be one of the major challenges which a BA would face. And managing the stakeholder expectations and all. There could be possibility of scope creep and scope management. There could be a time constraints and the resource constraints, the quality assurance and the testing challenges, the documentation and the knowledge management, the technology constraints and the complexity. So these are some of the few challenges a BA might face. Okay. Here also we have just given it a form of bullet points. So if you feel that other challenges are also there in the projects and all, you can mention about those challenges also and put it in an elaborative way. Okay. So the next question is about the document naming standards. Okay. So what is a document naming standard? The document naming standard is a systematic approach to assigning unique identifiers to various documents created and used throughout the development process. So once you have prepared your documents and all, we would be naming with some document standard. There is a format to name that. So I think you might know, right? In your systems and all, you'd be saving your Excel in form of .xls extension and Word documents dot some other extension and all, right? So in the same way, whatever the documents you are creating for your project, there is one format to follow. Okay, it depends upon the organization to organization, the document naming standards. And suppose we have a project with ID called project 123, and we are working with the requirement specification document. So here we have the project ID and the document type is requirement specification document. And the version is initially it is 1.0 and the date we have given. So here the document ID would be like, the project ID, the document type and the version and the date. So this is one document naming standard. Okay. So this is how the documents naming standards would be for the easy access of documents and all. So we use such document naming standards in order to know which document. So by looking into it, I can get to know. So this is a requirement specification document of version 1 on this day on this particular project type. That is how we can identify these documents through this document naming standards. Okay. The next question is about the do's and don'ts of a business analyst. So in your book also, if you observe, initially only at the starting of your book, the do's and don'ts would be there. So as a BA, there are certain do's and certain don'ts that BA need to look into it, right? So what are the do's over here? The consultant subject matter expert for clarification in the requirements. Suppose the BA has any doubts regarding the requirements and what he needs to do, we need to approach a subject matter experts and he need to clarify those doubts regarding the requirements. And okay, next they need to go with the go to the client with a plain mind with no assumptions, and BA needs to have a very patience and listen to them carefully, and they need to until client is done, they need to listen to them carefully. And then only you need to ask queries. A BA need to ask queries. It's not like the client is saying something and in between you need to ask them queries. As a BA, they need to have a very much patience. Okay. And they try to extract maximum leads to the solution from the client itself. And the BA needs to mainly focus on the important requirements mainly first. And they need to question the existence of existence and question everything. So if they're having some doubts, they need to question it. So what they need and all. So if there is any clarification regarding requirement or anything that they need about the project, they need to question about it. Okay. And then coming to the don'ts. So BA should never say no to the client. They should not say no to the client. And there is no word as by default. We should not use this word called by default. And never imagine in terms of GUI, which is graphical user interface. And don't interrupt the client when he's giving you the problem. So when they're saying about the problem, just do not interrupt them. And never try to give solutions to the client straight away with your previous experience and assumptions. It's not like you have some experience about this previously and directly give the solution. First, you need to analyze about it. Once it is done, every analysis is done regarding that, then only you need to give the solutions regarding. So these are the do's and don'ts of a business analyst. If you add any few more points that you could add over here, you can add that also. Okay. So next question is about the package and the subsystem. So what is packages? The packages are collection of components which are not reusable in nature. And the subsystems are collection of components which are reusable in nature. So mostly the application development companies work on these packages and the product development companies work on the subsystem. Here you need to mention about the packages and subsystem, the difference, and which would come under like an example of package and subsystem. Next. The next question is about the camel casing and its uses. So what is camel casing? So the camel casing is a naming convention which is mainly used in this computer programming. So it is used for the naming variables, functions, and identifiers. Okay. So it is mainly used in this programming languages, guys, when you're giving some instruction or functions or any naming some variables and all, you'll be using this camel casing. Okay. Coming to this camel casing, so whatever the naming conventions or the functions you are giving, every time the first word starts with a lowercase letter and each subsequent word begins with a uppercase letter. Okay, let us take this example only. Camel case example. If you observe over here, the first letter of the uh, word camel starts with the lowercase, whereas the remaining word starts with an uppercase. In case the C is capital and in example E is capital. This is how the camel casing would look like. Okay. Likewise, first mention about what is a camel casing and its uses, and then give one example related to camel casing. Any few examples related to camel casing. Okay. Next, the next question is about the development server and what are the accesses does a business analyst has. So first describe about what is a development server. So what is a development server? It refers to the dedicated environment or a server that is used during the software development process. So when a software is being developed at that time, we use this development server. Okay. For what purpose it is used? For developers and the testers in order to build, in order to test and debug applications before making this project going to the production environment or before getting it deployed or before making it live. Whatever the things with which they are doing regarding the development and testing and all, they put this in the development server. Okay. As a BA only has a limited access over here. So in this particular question, you need to mention what is this development server is about, who is have a proper access regarding this development server, and what type of access does a BA has in this development server. BA doesn't has an entire access, guys. He is only having the read only access for this. So get to know about that. Okay. So mention about all these details in this development server. The next question is about data mapping. So what is a data mapping? It's the process of connecting the data from one source to another source. So it is like creating a guide or a map that shows how the data in one place corresponds to data in another place. So when this is used mainly when you are moving a data from different systems or between the different databases. So that the data stays consistent and accurate. So whatever the related, whatever the content which is given in this PPT is just for your idea in order to know about the concept. But going forward, in your documents, you try to add more points to the answers. Okay. What is API? So API is nothing but an application programming interface, and it is a set of rules and tools that allow different software applications to communicate with each other. It defines the methods and data formats that applications can use to request and exchange information. Suppose if one application wants to communicate with another application, at that time, we use this API integration. So best example I can say in real time is suppose I think you people might be using Instagram, right? So in Instagram, there is some photo or there is some reel which you want to share it on to your friend on WhatsApp. So Instagram is one application and WhatsApp is another application. So how these are communicating, how we are sharing this in the reel in this Instagram to this person in WhatsApp through API integration only. So it helps different applications to communicate with each other. How is this possible? Through this API integration. For this question, mention about API. Okay. And what is API about and all. Example. Okay. This is all about your Prep 3 Part 1, guys. It consists of around 17 to 18 questions, and the rest of the questions are there in Prep 3 Part. Okay.